Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Thanks for coming along to another webinar. And I would normally say thanks for coming to our latest Evernym webinar, but of course, Evernym has been acquired by Avast. So we're now an Avast company, and everything's gone orange. So if you were fed up with the green, that's great. We're now orange, and hopefully that's going to be restful for you. Thanks for joining in. Great number of attendees today. This is not really so much of a technical session. This is about strategy for getting going with SSI. Joining me today, do you want to come off video there, Jamie? Joining me today is Jamie Smith, and Jamie looks after some of our biggest accounts and is a complete guru in both self-sovereign identity, but also the things that drive companies to launch new products and the way they look after their customers and create new customer propositions. Actually, I've just introduced you, Jamie, but do you want to do an intro?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Andy. Delighted to be here. You know, I've been working on SSI for probably 10 years now, or variants of it, but specifically with organizations. And how do you get this through an organization? How do you build a strategy? This isn't just about DIDs and wallets and all that cool tech. It's about business cases and customer experiences and persuasion inside organizations. And we're going to talk about that and how you get things to market. And very excited to have that conversation today. Excellent.
Thanks, Jamie, very much. Yeah, Scott loves the green, but yeah, we're orange now, Scott, so time to move on. Okay, on the agenda today, a quick update on the state of SSI. We're not going to spend ages on that. We want to come on to the meat of this, which is what it means for a little bit on individuals, because we've done enough webinars on why people would like this, but organizations particularly. And the focus here then comes on to how do you get ready? If you want a company, large or small, you're really interested in this new innovation called SSI, you want to know how digital credentials work, but what do you do to get set up? How do you start? And really we want to share some of the lessons we've learned from all of the engagements that Jamie and I have done. The majority of our time we spend out with customers, talking to them, helping them navigate their way. And we've learned all sorts of things, so we're going to share that with you, as much of it as we can with you today. As per usual, we're recording this webinar. They all go up on evernym.com/webinars. The Evernym name, by the way, still exists, but they'll be on evernym.com/webinars, so this will go up there shortly. Any questions you've got, put them in the Zoom Q&A. So the chat is for you guys just to chat amongst yourselves. We've got an amazing community of SSI experts and people who want to learn, and you're all on chat, so you can ask each other questions as well as putting stuff in the Q&A. But if there's something that you want us to address particularly, drop it in the Q&A, and Will Salmon is first off with what about augmented identity, so we'll add that one to the list. We'll come on. Usually we get far more questions than we can handle in the session, but we'll cover as many of them as we can just after we've done the formal bit of the presentation. Without further ado, let's dive into this. So there've been enough studies out talking about the future of identity being self-sovereign, being about digital credentials, being about personal identity and control. And we're seeing just this, it seems like every year, the start of every year, we get this another upsurge in interest. And it's the same thing again in 2022. We're getting more questions about how you move forward, how do you structure a project, how do you get started, and fewer questions about what's a blockchain, which used to be the case 6 years or so ago. So Jamie, you're seeing quite a lot happening out there. Do you want to just give us a quick overview about what you're seeing?
Absolutely. You know, it's not only an explosion of questions and kind of interest from organizations, but, you know, new initiatives being developed. You know, there's government partnerships being developed, between Spain and Germany, between Germany and Canada, countries getting together to understand what it means at a very national level, but also private companies getting together and saying, what could we do with our customer base if we start sharing data from the customers? And so, this map is just a sketch from Checked about where some of the hotspots are, from Finland to Canada to Argentina to New Zealand. And I think there's a trend in SSI being accepted as a new movement, as a new way to think about customer data. But what I think is also exciting is there's a real new wave of exciting new companies that are on the scene now, and they're global. They're in nearly every time zone. We're constantly getting up early and having late night conversations with partners and parts of the community and organizations. So I think number one, it's global. Number two, it's arrived. This thing that we've been talking about since 2015, 2016 is now really on the agenda at a government level, at an exec level, and is flowering across a whole number of startups who want to build in this new exciting way.
Yeah, and we're definitely seeing. I think the Avast acquisition of Evernym is a huge vote of confidence in the market generally. It's the first major acquisition. There've been some smaller ones, but it's the first major one. Obviously, we're delighted to be part of the Avast team, and it's a game changer for little Evernym to be in an organisation with 435 million customers, which is awesome. And crikey, what good things we can help them with. I'm personally responsible for all our work around EIDAS, so the European Digital Identity Initiative, the second version of it now. So EIDAS 1 is in existence already, EIDAS 2 is coming. And just on that topic, blimey, it's moving fast. And I think it's fair to say it's the biggest, I'm going to call it the biggest digital credential initiative in the world, although they don't use those terms yet. They talk about attestations, but we would in the SSI world recognize them as credentials. And it's the latest proposal to advance the current EIDAS 1 into EIDAS 2 and make it really well aligned with the principles that we've been espousing for years now about the citizen being in control, privacy and security, features like unlinkability, the selective disclosure, zero knowledge proofs, all of these things. So just this week, what day is it today? Just the end of last week, the European Digital Identity Architecture Reference Framework document was published. And that's hot on the heels of some of the other EU proposal documents that came out, particularly a call to tender as well. And they're moving really quickly. They've looked at how fast they got the digital COVID credential running. So the digital COVID certificates running, the QR codes with your vax status in it and so on, and trying to replicate that speed and agility with the EIDAS 2. So it's moving really quickly. And it's looking very interesting for all those with an SSI approach and the sort of policies and kind of direction that we have about user control and avoiding big tech. So it's very, very firmly orientated in that direction. So the EIDAS is looking really pretty serious. And if you wanted to check out the latest blog post that we did, you'll see it there, evernym.com/blog/EIDAS. It's also on the Avast blog as well. That's on 4 things to watch out for, 4 problem areas, 4 opportunities, and 3 things that could go either way. So that's a good read to digest a lot of the content that's out there. And shortly, imminently, we'll have another post which is an analysis of that framework document that came out. So we've done that, so you don't have to, and that will be out imminently. So all of that is going on in Europe. It's really moving, and Jamie, you're seeing that all those other things around the world happening as well, right? And have a nice graph to show it.
It's that global trend that I mentioned before. This is research that's been done by Liminal. And if there was ever a picture that described this by region and the growth that we're going to see over the next 3, 4, 5 years, this is it. And it's not just about the actual growth every year on year, $250 billion market, but it's the fact that it's across Asia Pacific, LATAM, Middle East, Europe. Europe very clearly doing something at national scale. Hundreds of millions of citizens can get a wallet, but what happens when that's portable to these other regions? And we're going to talk about interoperability later on, but this very much is a global opportunity, a global story. And guess what? The organizations who are building strategies around this, many of them are global. They're multi-region, and we need to think about how customers are going to act in different regions and have different requirements.
Yeah, certainly seeing that as well. And actually, Mark Packham asked a question. We'll just cover this one now. Hey there, Mark. Do you see the expansion in SSI coming from a combination of the need from a pandemic aspect and also the maturing of governance frameworks, or are there other drivers? You could probably answer that one quickly, Jamie, because there's been, the pandemic's resulted in a lot of changes and a quite an impetus, isn't it, for SSI?
I think we won't go too deep into it, but I think the global health emergency has meant that we've had to do things remotely, where otherwise we might have done it face to face, and that's driving a part of it. I think the digital agenda in enterprises has been going on for probably a decade, but it feels like the handbrake's been on. It feels like they're digitizing processes they have, and SSI is the opportunity to really make some of those experiences and processes digital, which means you can do lots of new things, new revenue models and so on, which we'll again come on to.
We'll come on to that, yeah, absolutely. I kind of
mix of things.
Yeah, I agree with that. It feels like there's stagnation in innovation. And SSI, as you'll see shortly, I think we'll bring in the next wave. Yeah, questions, put them in the Q&A, please, not in the chat. I'll just answer Scott's one. Will EU identities be acceptable for KYC purposes at financial institutions? Absolutely, Scott. And not only will they be acceptable, but it's likely banks will be mandated to accept them. So that's an interesting one to look at. Okay, so yeah, on that topic then, Jamie, just about individuals, we cover this quite a lot, don't we? But do you just want to do a quick recap on what it means for individuals here?
Absolutely. We have a whole library of content from our our webinars and papers on what this is going to mean for customers, for citizens, for consumers, and for the first time, this really going to be customer centric. I think a lot of the solutions that are out there at the moment are kind of product centric or platform centric. I think we can really shift power into the hands of the individual. Data is going to be portable, it's going to be verifiable and private. But I'd encourage you to go and look at our back catalogue of points of view about new customer experiences and what it's going to mean for people. But today we're going to really focus on the next bit, which is what it means for organizations. So why don't I kind of step into some of the real themes that we're working with organizations on. Yeah. So the first thing is, organizations are coming to us because of growth challenges. They're looking for 0.5%, 1% improvement on their conversion at the front door when customers arrive. But SSI allows them to really transform what customer engagement looks like. And that allows them to drive new revenues, create entirely new revenue streams. If you've got a new connection with a customer, you can create new opportunities and new ways to make money. And this idea of turning regulation into revenue means, the things you're doing because you have to, maybe they can become new revenue streams and new money making opportunities because you're giving data to customers that you have to. Maybe that can be reused elsewhere in the ecosystem. But it's not just
that's a really good point about EIDAS regulation that is likely to come out. It's not going to be like GDPR, which is just pure cost and pain. You're going to be able to completely transform user experiences, aren't you?
Exactly, and that's the kind of the second theme that is worth calling out. That from onboarding to creating end-to-end journeys that might cut across different products or different parts of the business that we can now create seamlessly. And that good old usernames and passwords. Well, we can give the customer a magic wand and they can now interact with different parts of the organization, but also be instantly recognized. And when you've got this idea of a hotline directly to the customer, if the organization calls the individual, they know it's going to be the organization. And when the customer shows up in any channel, even face-to-face, we can know exactly who it is without having to fill out forms or answer questions about date of birth and so on. Yeah. And again, there's so many other things. It's not just customer experiences, it's also about cost. If you can acquire customers faster, cheaper, if you can handle less data, that your costs go down, the overheads go down. If you can ask for a yes or a no, rather than having to collect all that data, the processes become more streamlined and verifying data becomes far more easy. And that's going to just improve margin.
I think there's a really good point in this, Jamie, as well, which is that there might be a bunch of products that an organization would like to launch, but it's too expensive for them to do the acquisition, right? And that then brings on, well, once you reduce the cost, you can get the onboarding slicker and fast, and you can then launch a product that you wouldn't have been profitable otherwise, right?
Absolutely. And that takes us to risk. We don't do things in organizations because it's too risky. Launching new products, collecting different types of data, the Department of No, that stops things. Actually, if we can collect better data, more quality data, consented data, then we can think much vastly different about how we launch products, how we go to market. There's fewer compliance headaches. We're storing less data. And because you've got this connection with the customer, you can get the data when you need it rather than having to store it for forever. And thinking about compliance and risk in a different way. And then finally, thinking about new customer ecosystems. So this idea of customer journeys beyond the business. Banks sometimes think about, the customer journey being, I need a mortgage to I have a mortgage, becomes, well, maybe I need to think about moving home because my wife's pregnant, through to moving in, and all the different touch points and customer experiences that we could enable once we organize the information around an individual. So we won't again go too much into the detail, but these are the value drivers for organizations. These are the pillars that underpin the business case for SSI. And this is where we have really deep experience on how to get this through an organization. This isn't just how can we knock up a quick POC. This is about how can you build a compelling business case and sustainable new revenue model for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're going to come on to right now. And just before we do, the chat is alive. I love this. It's probably the most lively chat we've had where people are answering each other's questions, Jamie. So that's fantastic. So thanks everyone for being so engaged. Just watching stuff scrolling by is fantastic. There were a couple of questions came in. I'm just going to answer two of these quickly because they're related directly to what I said back there. Julian Wilson, hi Julian, good to see you on again. Please can you tell me who and when have mandated banks accepting verifiable credentials for KYC? So I think what you need to do, Julian, is look at the EU EIDAS 2 proposal, and in there you'll find a clause, I can't remember which number it is, but I'm sure somebody on the chat will know, that says, and the wording is quite interesting, I think it's something like praising a little bit, medium and large organizations that need strong customer authentication. It's not quite a must yet, but I think it's along the lines of will be expected to accept credentials from EIDAS wallets. And remember, that document is a proposal, but what will happen is that will get converted into regulation, okay? And that starts to get very interesting. So I think you need to watch that one really carefully about whether that the regulation is going to come out to mandate that medium and large size organizations, if a customer turns up with a verifiable credential or qualified electronic attestation of attributes, that they will have to accept it. Okay, so keep an eye on that one. Simone Ravioli says, sorry about that on the surname. How do you make money with SSI? Well, crikey, we're coming on to that in a second. As Jamie said, there's all of these opportunities for organizations, and where do you start? And we get this question a lot. Where can you possibly start? And I used to work in large organizations. You know, I spent 10, 11 years at O2, Telefonica O2, big mobile operator. And you're there with all these ideas. How do you do something? And we just want to share some of the advice and lessons learned, and how we go about approaching this kind of question about how do you start, where do you start? And first off, you need to figure out the customer problem first. What's the most important thing you could solve that's going to deliver value, and who is it going to affect? And not only that, but who do you need to get involved in the business? All right. Jamie, over to you on some lessons learned.
Yeah, I think these kind of top line questions are really at the root of our experience in getting SSI through a large organization, or even small organizations. But we want to call out not only kind of what we think is emerging as good practice, but some of the scars on our back of where things have gone wrong. Yeah. And, you know, I think companies that come to us saying we're doing a blockchain project is a bit of a red flag. You know, we think that's going to be stuck in innovation land for quite a long time. And I think those projects that have really failed to get traction are those without a business case. Because in these really challenging times when everyone's fighting for oxygen and budgets, and you know, businesses are getting ever more complicated with ever more customer channels, if you don't have a rock solid business case, and that's where we got to start. And it's got to be about customer value, customer experience, cost reduction, compliance. Some of the other challenges is where businesses come into the idea of SSI with the expectation of kind of monetizing the data they have. Yeah. And that's in itself not a problem. It's the fact that they're missing what's in black at the top there, which is what the customer problem are we solving? They're solving for their own issue, which is revenue growth, and not for how can we solve customer problems, which might include a revenue stream for monetizing data. Yeah. And lastly on this, this one for me is about, this will grow large and we hope be, you know, open and with lots of interoperability everywhere. There'll be lots of wallets. It's going to create massive ecosystems. But one of the blind spots is that people are designing for that future and, you know, take on these massive ecosystems. And it means projects that should be done in 3 to 6 months take 3 years. Yeah. And so, you know, this idea of starting simply, solving for a very specific customer need, building a strategic business case, which we'll come on to in a minute, is really critical. And some of this might be motherhood and apple pie, but we feel, especially because SSI has been such a technical discipline, people get very excited about DIDs and VCs and interop and universal wallets and universal resolvers. Actually, what problem are we solving? And without that, the rest of it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, we got some real success stories, haven't we? With
oh yeah.
So I'm sure Phil, our great friend at the NHS, is on, and won't mind me name checking him, but the UK NHS, and we use this as an example a lot. And the reason why is because it's a really good example. The problem they wanted to solve is, how does a medic, a staff member, doctor, move from hospital A to hospital B and prove to hospital B that they are a doctor, right? And they could quantify that problem and the amount of money it costs, and they understood and qualified all of the components they needed to make it work and launched it. They have 100 hospitals rolled out, and they're now expanding on the back of that and making it, you know, addressing other problems, aligned problems based around that same business case. That's a really nice example. And you know, talking about value, you figure out the customer problem. What does that mean, right? What does that mean? And you might be saying, okay, what we're going to do is that we're going to reduce the friction of onboarding, and it'd be fantastic. And we're going to, I don't know, reduce shopping cart abandonment by 20%. Okay. That, of course, depends on a bunch of your customers coming along, what we call the first mile problem. where's their wallet? Have they got any credentials in it? And this is always the catch-22 with SSI is you're going to have issuers who want there to be lots of verifiers. So issuers of the credentials who want their people to use them in many places, and there'll be verifiers wanting there to be issuers giving people credentials in the first place. This is one of the really important things about the European EIDAS situation, is that's going to bootstrap millions of Europeans with really high quality digital credentials that they can use in lots and lots of places. So that's the first bit of it is how do you get started? You can see where the value is, but you need to still also be able to get started. And some lessons learned.
Just to build on that, the value will sit in different departments of an organization. And this, back to my point about the business case, there's a ton of value that you could stitch together across different departments. And that makes it a strategic business case rather than a tactical one. Oh, we're just going to solve login, or we're just going to solve customer onboarding. Well, we can solve both if it becomes a strategic business case up with the executives. And then that makes it harder for it to accidentally die because someone leaves the organization or just languishing in one department. So this idea of an executive view gives us a view across the whole organization. And from a lessons learned point of view, that stakeholder engagement is critical. And there's stories you can tell. Is this top down with SSIs coming, we've got to get on board, versus this idea of bottom up? Well, maybe we can solve this specific problem and this specific problem, and we can quantify the value. So I think having a commercial perspective from the start is where we see the real value. And when projects that we've worked on, both the public ones and the ones that have been commercially private, they've had most success when it's been strategic, when they're solving a specific problem, and they've engaged the stakeholders in a very thoughtful way. Yeah. We've been involved as partners because they can go faster, quicker, and that means they'll be able to create value quickly and engage those stakeholders. So, very, very important, not just to solve the problem, but work out where's the value for the organization and being really crisp about why the business should be paying attention.
And being able to communicate that value is really key, isn't it? So what are the tools you need to communicate up the line why it's important, and what's involved in getting to first base, essentially. We've got a really excellent example, a bank we're working with. They started off with a sort of innovation, it's a blockchain kind of project, and it didn't reach exit velocity to get out of innovation land because they hadn't looked at the business value. And now they're starting again. They're saying, right, firstly, where's the business value, all right? What use cases are we going to solve? And then coming on to that is what is the tech we need and the role we play, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. The next part of our advice here is about knowing what sort of ecosystem you're in. And we've got three types here that we're going to talk about: closed, managed, and open. A closed ecosystem might be employee identity, using digital credentials for employee identity, where it's within that employer. It might be a big employer, right? But it's within an employer, and you're proving that you can get into an office, you're proving you're allowed to sign into a system, you're proving you've done your latest fire training or whatever it may be. So that would be a closed ecosystem, and you can get started with them really easily. And often we recommend people do this. They start with a closed ecosystem that you can tightly control, especially if it's employee ID, you've got a captive market. So you can say to people, use this new function. The next type is what we call a managed ecosystem. Now, if we look at, let's go back to that NHS example again. I would call the NHS example a managed ecosystem, right? It's employee ID, but in the NHS, each hospital trust is a separate organization, right, with separate employment contracts and so on. And the key thing with a managed ecosystem is you have participation by permission, and you have some kind of trust registry, right, Jamie? There's enabling people to recognize who's allowed in and who's not allowed in. So that's a good example of a managed ecosystem, and that the managed ecosystem can start small and expand outwards. And that indeed is what the NHS are looking at the moment, is not just hospitals, but going out into further afield and maybe including contractors and so on. So that's a kind of really interesting approach. And then the last one, and we're not seeing many of these yet, is a completely open ecosystem. And is there really an example of this at the moment in the SSI world? I'd argue probably not. And will there ever be, right? Will there ever be something that doesn't need a set of rules and controls over it? What do you think, Jamie?
I think part of this narrative is people are designing for perfect interoperability, and this idea I can take my credentials anywhere. And in time, it's going to feel like my leather wallet. I've got my bits of information in it. I can take it to somewhere that's not seen me before, and I can present it, and they can verify it's me, and they're going to know where to look up where the issuers came from and what the rules are. I think the view here is starting with a closed or a managed ecosystem is going to allow us to create edges around what we're trying to build, so that we can get towards what will be an open ecosystem, and I can prove things about myself to a business that's not seen me before, but is participating and has a solution to enable me to share data. So I think directionally we're moving left to right. The question that we're asking here is understanding where you are right now and how to make progress quickly without thinking too far ahead. And on the next couple of questions, we're going to see that some of the challenges are around is getting ahead of ourselves. Actually, it's a bit like it's 1995. We've got the web's coming, and people are saying, oh, we're going to be able to do vlogging and online banking. And they're like, whoa, I just need to put my PDF online yet and understand how to get customers to come and visit my website. So it's about the steps. We're going to get there, but it's understanding what ecosystem you're in right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're looking deeply into the IDAS framework document. So the potential is there for it to be an open ecosystem where anyone can issue a credential into a wallet and anyone can verify a credential from a wallet. Okay, there's potential for it to be like that, but there are some words in there that are a bit worrying, and we're putting this in our consultation feedback, and it will be in the digest that we do of that actual document that we publish either later on today or tomorrow. There are some worrying things like relying parties, i.e. verifiers, should register with their member state to be able to verify data from a wallet. And now if you think about it and use the analogy to physical documents, I can go into my corner shop and show them my passport to prove I'm over 18, to use that hackneyed old example. They don't have to register with the government to be able to look at my passport. So why should they, just because the bearer of the data is digital rather than paper, right? So there's some stuff that needs to be watched carefully in IDAS that could make it much more managed than open, and that would be a shame, and it would reduce the uptake of it rather significantly, I think, as well. The good news with IDAS is the document does say that private sector organizations will be able to put credentials in a wallet as well as them coming from qualified, certified organizations. So that's really good. We've covered some of this already, but knowing what kind of ecosystem you want to start with is really important. And Jamie, some more lessons learned there, I think.
Completely. Thinking about your organization is likely not the only group going through this. There's others who are learning the same lessons, going at different speeds. Is there an opportunity for cohort learning? And something we've been doing for a few years now is connecting our customers and saying, look, you're going through the same problems. Can we introduce you to, have learning sessions and discovery sessions, because they've got some of the same challenges. And the last bullet on the left there is important for me. I was kind of underneath what I was saying a minute ago. Just think carefully about the requirements. We see a lot of RFPs and a lot of initiatives or projects designing for this end state and saying, well, we've got to have this very long list of requirements. We will get there. It's just, do we need them as hard requirements right now? Probably not. And an example of that is, I've seen, trying to get to the open ecosystem requirement so quickly, they've dropped some privacy questions in the short term. And we've said, actually, better to have a closed ecosystem or a managed one that is private and therefore can get to open, than try and make it open now and accidentally miss out some of the core requirements because you're so desperate to get there. So, thinking about interoperability, we're going to get there. BBS plus, universal resolvers, the standardized rails, new ledgers, we're going to get there. But if we wait for all that and we think about the open ecosystem too early, we're going to hamper our progress. And that's back to questions 1 and 2. What problem are we solving? What's the business case? Why do we get the attention of our executives? And from a lessons perspective, this is about moving quickly, understanding the dependencies, and the projects that have worked, that have made the most progress, and therefore have learned the most, because we don't have all the answers yet, are the ones that move quickly, do things inexpensively, and keep it small. The ones that struggle are trying to over-engineer and are building complicated monoliths. Or we're going to build a super app. It's going to be
trying to do too much at once. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And we've got a really good project going at the moment where it's been divided into a number of small chunks, each of which is delivering incrementally on the next, and it allows you to show progress and not only show progress but demonstrate stuff to people as well. Really good chat going on here at the moment, which is excellent. Just actually, Sammy made a question, put a question in. Jamie, we'll just cover it now because it's on that topic. Seems like a big jump from managed to open. Have you considered something in between, for example, a model where there are multiple open ecosystems, each that accept or trust a particular wallet or set of verifiable credentials? Yeah, well, absolutely. We're actually trying to work out how best to represent this with interlocking pictures and diagrams and that kind of thing. But absolutely, Sammy, you could have closed ecosystems that evolve and then start to trust each other. And then you have a trust list that says, oh, actually, yeah, you can trust credentials from that ecosystem and ones from that ecosystem. And you'll see that happening already anyway. You'll see it with IDAS because that each member state will have to trust credentials from each other member state as well. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how that evolves. And then whether you get the European identity stuff being acceptable in Canada and in Australia, for example, that I think is going to take you down that route. So, oops, I just missed, I went a slightly too fast. So what role do you want to play as the next piece? We'll probably have to speed up a bit, Jamie, actually. Hopefully everyone's read this by now anyway, so we can go to the next bit.
I think the understanding the role is a really important perspective, because again, there are businesses trying to do it all when actually there are partners and pieces of the puzzle that could help you move faster, and that's this picture here, Andy.
Yeah, exactly. So we use the trust over IP framework as an anchoring model to help people understand where they should play, right? And if you're not familiar with it, look at trustoverip.org. This model is a really good animated version of it, and there's a whole load of explanatory text as well. It allows you to essentially define what a good credential ecosystem has and all of the components that make it up. And what we then do is we overlay on top of that a whole bunch of roles, right? And it's a bit like a sort of jigsaw puzzle, right? You've got to fill in every component, or a crossword. You've got to fill in every box, because if you've got a missing box, you can have a missing function and the whole thing doesn't work. So we overlay roles on it. So for example, okay, somebody's got to provide on the technology side a credential exchange platform like Verity that we have. Somebody's got to have a DID repository or trust network layer, like Sovereign, for example, or Findi in Finland. And then you've got to have someone who brings the ecosystem together on the governance side. You've got to have the rules around, how do you audit the ecosystem? Who writes the rules and the policies? How are they maintained? Is there a trust registry, etc.? So you start to sort of piece together all of the bits that you need, and you then need to work out, well, who's going to provide these? all right? And once you start overlaying that and you say, okay, we need someone developing mobile apps, that could be a developer, and then there needs to be someone then managing, you know, the release of those apps into the market and looking at customer feedback and all of that kind of thing. You build up the picture of the ecosystem. So we use this model a lot because it's really good, and it lets you do this overlay approach, which has been really successful. So knowing all these moving parts, I think the thing is to know what you're best at and use others who are best at other things to
Exactly.
form the ecosystem.
I think there's a tendency, because it's this new secret sauce, this SSI thing. Organizations or teams are trying to say, well, we'll do the whole stack, we'll build the whole thing, and it's saying, you know, only manage what you have to. Others are having the same challenges. Could you collaborate? Well, you've got the wallet. You could be a strategic issuer, and thinking about where the value is across those different partnerships. And you know, there's a bullet here about the commercial model. It isn't just about how the verifiers are going to pay. Is it per transaction, or how do the issuers monetize? All those boxes are going to need a commercial model. You know, how do the trust registries work? How do the ledgers work? How does that flow into the P&L, if you like, of the product? There's a lot of great insight out there, and I think copy, you know, imitate, partner. We think things can go much faster if you do. Yeah,
perfect. Oh, somebody's answered that question about from A to B about the Apple mobile driving license. Thanks, Gert. ISO 18013-5. It has a few issues if you've got an SSI hat on, like the verifier pinging the issuer if it's an online transaction to get the driving license information, so the issuer knows everywhere you're using your driving license. Few issues like that. No selective disclosure in the way we know, and so on. Anyway, let's not worry about that for now. Let's talk about other capabilities you need. So looking at what's available today and seeing what's coming. So as Jamie said earlier, don't design nirvana yet, all right? Get started with what's available and you'll be amazed at what there is. Like Jamie said, we get RFPs that want things that aren't going to be around for several years yet. So be realistic about what you want to build now. Jamie, open source as well. Comments on open source?
Absolutely. But people are very excited about open source. You know, Evernym back in 2018-19 said, look, actually all our products are going to be open source. And that's great for the market. It's great for competition. It's great for interoperability conversations. I think it gives you options, but it doesn't necessarily give you speed. And it's thinking about the best way to build a product for your POC versus production. And of course, it's interoperable. You know, you should be able to choose your technology over time. And I think there's some smart decisions that can be made to use the right tech for the initial build that might be different for the production rollout.
Yeah, perfect. Loads of questions about, can we get the slide deck? Everyone wants the overlay. So sure, I think Alex is our webinar whisperer behind the scenes. Can we put the, yeah, we've never had so many requests for the deck. Let's put the deck online for people, shall we? Probably take the comments out, not the comments, the speaker notes, such as they are. All right, so that's advice and lessons learned, and let's just tell you how we approach this whole situation. Jamie, do you want to cover this now?
Yeah, I think the space is moving so quickly. There's so many moving parts. There's so many unanswered questions, and I think people think, well, we need someone to help us who's got all the answers. And we'd say we've got a lot of answers at Avast and Evernym, but it's also about knowing which questions to ask. That's part of the support. You know, this is about having guides and support as you go on the journey. It's about having a partner, not a vendor. You know, and this is new tech. There's lots of awkward corners. One of the first questions I get is, what happens if you lose your phone? Like guaranteed first call every time. Yeah, yeah. And we've got some of that, and it's not that there's all the answers to every use case, but it's thinking about the considerations. And you know, we provide hands-on coaching, expert support, all that stuff with this enterprise plan. And I think what's really shifted is from, hey, can you help us with the tech, to how do we roll this out? We've got to have a conversation with the Chief Information Security Officer. How do we do that? Like, where are the gaps? And thinking about what are the modules that we need to go through? What are the steps? And so this is a kind of a tailored program that we've developed with all these modules. They don't need to go in this specific order. Many organizations start with the business modeling and model 6. So it's not just left to right. It's about understanding which pieces you need. Sometimes you don't yet have a customer use case. It's about finding, how do you prioritize? Sometimes it's saying, no, we know what the use case is. We need help delivering it. So Andy, maybe talk a bit about, this example of choosing where to start.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, like you say, Jamie, people start in different places. Often a business model bit is a good place to start, and a target business requirement might be, I need to get my checkout abandonment down by 20%. Great. So what use case does that relate to? It's online shopping, and it's et cetera, et cetera. And this is one of the most valuable bits of work that we do is selecting and ranking use cases. And we struggled quite a bit for how do you get a 2x2, right? That encompasses everything, and you can't do it. So you've got to look at it through different lenses. And one lens might be, for example, pain versus market volume. All right. So the pain for customers, so it could be really high pain, but if the volume of transactions is really low, then there's no point really doing it, right? Compared to something that's got maybe lower pain, but millions of transactions. Virality, also really important. So is the thing you're doing, if you're issuing credentials for purpose number 1, can they be used for purpose number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as well, right? So are you creating something that's going to result in viral take-up because it's not defined into a very, very singular purpose? And then another one be return on investment. So there's just different ways. What we're saying is different ways to look at the use cases through different lenses, and then determine which one is the most important one for you. So that's really just to give you an idea of the approach we use. No doubt people have screenshotted all this by now anyway, which is great. I think we're going to make the deck available, which would be fantastic. Plus you've got this as well. And I think we can probably move on to questions and answers that are coming in as well. So should we cover that off, Jamie? And we're late as usual, because there's been so much going on. Chat has been sensational, everyone. So thank you to everyone who's been chatting and actually answering your own questions in chat. People have been answering for each other, it's been marvelous to see it go through. I've kind of missed a lot of it just through chatting. But let's have a look at some questions we've got now. And I think maybe we spend, actually, let me just stop the share there so you can see our big faces. What time are we on now? Yeah, so let's spend maybe 15 minutes on this. And A to B, where will the resources of the webinar be available? evernym.com/webinars is where we put them at the moment. Right, so we've got about 72,000 questions, Jamie. So should we just crack on through them?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Alex has highlighted a few of them. Okay, so Mark Haddle. Hello, Mark. Mark's been asking loads of really good questions here. Is there a sort of global phone book once verifiers gain read access to the trust layer? Right, is there how will verifiers know who to trust? Jamie, trust lists and things. Do you want to talk through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's answering the question, how do I know I can trust the credential? When I receive a new credential, maybe I'm a merchant, I'm proving I'm over 18, or I've got a certain I've got a buy now pay later, a pre-approved contract or pre-approved agreement. I think there needs to be some lookup to some trust registries, and back to the point earlier about ecosystems, who's going to run that trust registry and what's the economic model behind it?
Yes.
We see that a lot. There's a lot of tech emerging now of how do you run that trust registry. I think in different ecosystems, there's going to be different providers. I can imagine the financial regulators might run trust registries of who the approved sources of address are. You know, if I open, I've used this example before. If I open a bank account, we're not going to trust Jamie's water company as my proof of address, but we might trust my local government or energy provider. So there's going to be a registry of approved sources for specific governance ecosystems. Bit of a mouthful, but it means that for specific credentials and specific uses of them, there'll be places you can look up. And I expect that data, that those contexts will be governed in specific by specific bodies. For more general purpose credentials like driving license, you know, I expect those are going to be publicly available sources of trust that governments will run. And I'll be able to prove that I can prove that my address, or I'm a citizen, or I live in a certain postcode from those registries. So that's how we can move from, for example, a managed ecosystem to an open one. And the question mark is going to be who's going to run those registries. And when it becomes, you know, I see SSI become critical national infrastructure, to be honest. And I can, over time, this is going to take a long time, but once we get there, there's going to be registries that will provide those commonly used everyday credentials. And until then, they're going to be proxies. They're going to be organizations who run it for you.
Yeah, that's where this overlay model is really useful, because if you look at the unoverlaid bit on the left-hand side here, you'll see that, you know, there's a credential framework, there's a governing authority for the ecosystem framework, ecosystem roles, and you'll need a trust registry and a maintainer for doing that. So the global address book, right, is likely to be a list of decentralized identifiers on a decentralized ledger somewhere, or some other decentralized store, something that is reliable and, you know, isn't going to fall over once one part of it gets hacked. It just keeps going. So you need to know what DID is good. How do you know if this credential has come from a DID that is trustworthy? And in the IDAS 2.0, again, there is some provision in there for that with qualified trust service providers, but other organizations may want to be trusted as well. So these ecosystems will kind of intermerge. So it's going to be really interesting. So that was a quite long answer to your question, Mark, about is there a global phone book? There'll be a global list of, there'll be maybe several global lists of DIDs, and then somebody overlays on top which of those you can trust. So let me just stop the share. In fact, I can't find out how to stop the share. I'll do that in a minute when I ask the next question. Right, so let's find one here. Oh, actually, we've answered that one already. Gertz, hi Gertz, says, how can we ensure interoperability between SSI components, wallets, credentials, methods, etc.? I think this is the reason for the EU toolbox. Do you ever go on interoperability, Jamie? And I can talk a bit about the toolbox stuff as well.
Absolutely, and there's a short answer and a long answer, and I think the short answer is going to be, again, interoperability for what purpose, you know, and that then becomes about what's the ecosystem you're in. You know, if this is a staff passport within a governed, a very closed or a managed ecosystem, then interoperability is going to work within that ecosystem. For example, you know, HR credentials within a couple of small partners. If this is about true interoperability, then we're back to trust over IP. Are we going to have interoperability of credentials, meaning signature schemes? Are we going to have interoperability of wallets, meaning the peer-to-peer connections and what DID methods and the DID spec that we might use to create those connections? And then at a very meta level, you know, how could I take a credential from Europe and open a bank account in Argentina? Well, the governing authorities will have to say, well, your address looks like this and my address looks like that. How do we get them to interoperate together? So the cheats answer is, we need to think about interoperability at a ledger level, at a wallet level, at a credential kind of signature level, and at an ecosystem level. And I think there are some great bodies coming together. GAIN is a new one that's come together to try and solve that problem. Trust over IP is coming together to look at governance of each of those. But if I think about IATA, you know, IATA is the air travel
Air Transport Association.
Air Transport Association, exactly. And they're setting standards for things like boarding passes, and they have built a reference implementation of a digital wallet for a traveler. Will they be wanting interoperability with hotel, car rental, vaccine certificates? Of course. And they're working very hard behind the scenes on governance to look at interoperability of what the standards would be, so they can publish the rules for air travel. And that means all the vendors can come in and meet those requirements. And I know the NHS is doing the same for their requirements gathering. So the answer is policy and requirements, and the second is kind of technical working groups to ensure it. But lots more at DIF, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and lots more at Trust Over IP.
And a lot of these organizations already exist, right? So ICAO manages what a passport looks like and what data's on it. IATA, as Jamie says, looks after boarding passes. There's organizations already that standardize on things, and we'll just need to say, well, here's what a digital credential looks like. And in the IDAS proposal at the moment, yeah, there's going to be a common toolbox that everyone will be able to use. There'll be a reference digital wallet that will be open source, I'm sure, that anyone can build on top of. So that's one way to do it. And I think the work the EU is doing is probably going to lead the world in that standardization effort. Next question, here's one after my own heart from Julius. Hopefully Julius is still on. Will SSI be the real beginning of the metaverse? So as we're seeing quite a lot of headlines at the moment about people getting kind of virtually assaulted in the metaverse, and people possibly being conned, and dodgy NFT providers, and how do you know you're in the real Nike shop if you're wanting to buy some virtual trainers? The metaverse will need identity as well, so watch this space on that one. About 8 million other questions. How are we doing on time? Okay,
I think we're probably reaching the end, Andy, and I do want to come back to this idea of having a partner, not a vendor.
Yeah,
a lot of organizations are saying we need the tech, and something I wanted to mention earlier is in our experience, tech is probably 25% of the project, maybe. There are all the other questions like, what happens if it goes wrong? How does this, how does this fit with our existing policies and processes? How do we think about interoperability and governance? How do we consider the business case? So who's going to issue what credential, and how do we audit them? So those are considerations we want to really hammer home, that this is about having a partner that can help you with that, and having method and rigor, because not all the questions have answers yet. We don't even know all the questions. Yeah. But we've been at the front of this market for quite a long time now, and we feel confident that getting this through an organization takes many months, sometimes years, and having someone who can help you with that is where you should start. And we've got this service available now, so please get in touch if you're interested in the enterprise plan, and we can help you with not only the tech, but also the advisory services to help make it through the organization, engaging stakeholders, prioritizing use cases, building the business case, and then go to market.
I think that's a perfect summary, Jamie, and I'll just leave that slide up there for a minute while I say to everybody, thank you for everyone who joined in, over like 130, 140 participants, which is just fantastic. Thank you for that. Thanks for all the really interactive Q&A going on. Sorry we can't answer more questions, there are so many, but what we do is we take these in and we make new webinars that focus on some of the questions that we get. So they are really valuable. So thank you for those that sent them in. Thanks for the thanks on the chat. It's really appreciated. Look out for the next one. If you watch on evernym.com/webinars, you'll see the recording for this one. We'll put the deck up. Look for the next one coming. I'm sure we're going to do stuff on EIDAS as well. We'll probably do a digest of all the pros and cons we're seeing in the framework stuff coming out as well. So thanks again for everyone for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly do. There's nothing better than me and Jamie chatting. We like nothing better. So we will see you on the next one. Thanks very much indeed.